Hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, The Dark and the Strange. This week, as always, you have Paul.
And I'm Tara.
And our discussion this week is about something I know absolutely nothing about. It's called the Death Van. So, not sure if you understand what I'm saying because it's an Irish accent, but all good. Anyway, without further ado, Tara is going to be your host for this week, and let's see how it goes. Over to you, Tara.
The good news is, Paul, that YouTube has subtitles these days, so hopefully YouTube understands what you said.
Well, unfortunately, we can't get subtitles at the moment, but it's all good.
So welcome everyone back. I've had a little bit of a break, but today I'm going to be talking about Jack Kevorkian and the Death Van. So the reason I decided to choose this topic today was when I was at that Zak Bagans Museum that I spoke about in our first episode. And one of the exhibitions they sort of had there at the museum was the Death Van that apparently Jack Kevorkian used to own. Now, they haven't actually 100% confirmed that that is specifically the van that he used, but I guess all signs point to yes. So if you're not sort of familiar with Jack Kevorkian, he was actually a pathologist. He was born back in 1928 and had a career essentially working with a lot of death and had a very morbid curiosity. So then when he decided to essentially, finish his studies and whatnot, he moved more into studying, I guess, what happens after death and sort of the science around that. And the thing about him was that he immigrated over with his family. He was from Michigan and he basically did all of his research around dying patients. So he used to take lots of photos. He used to deal with a lot of terminally ill people and then became this whole obsession around death. So then essentially he started, posting a lot of papers and these theories about death, and that made him quite controversial to the point where, obviously he decided that he wanted to help people die with dignity. The whole discussion around death, I guess. So when he became a lot more vocal about this, it was probably around the 1980s, so a little bit before me. He became a lot more vocal about terminally individuals and having their own rights to end their lives, essentially. And then he argued a lot that, modern medicine, was prolonging suffering, that patients should have autonomy over those decisions and how they would like to die. Back in the 80s, it's not so much that, death was, legal in the States, but it wasn't so much illegal either with assisted suicide. So he kind of jumped on that whole vagueness in the laws at that point to take that opportunity to move into that area. And then what came of that was essentially his own design, which is actually called let me refer to my notes here, the Thanatron van. And I don't know about you, Paul, but I'm intrigued about having a mobile death van coming around like, hey guys, just popping in for my appointment with my van. It just seems a little bit ahead of its time now that I think about just the logistics of it. But I suppose, coming around or people dying in their houses caused a lot more issues back then, or you couldn't just go to a hospital and have assisted suicide back then. So this was kind of the space in which he operated. So once he actually constructed this particular Thanatron, Mercitron, and then placed it inside his van, it was all based around patients or people being able to end their own lives. So he had this set up. So it was essentially like, you'd have an IV placed in your arm and then the patient or the person would then press the button which released like a sedative. So, sodium thiopental. And then once they were unconscious, then the additional chemicals flowed automatically. That stopped their breathing and then their heart. So Kevorkian then sort of emphasized that, the patient initiated that process, that it was all about their own personal autonomy, and that it reduced his role. He was just sort of the prepper of the situation, essentially. So when the van came into play, and that's what we all think about, I guess, when we talk about the death van or Jack Kevorkian and why he was so famous, it was a 1968 Volkswagen, and then I think of that and I think, that was such a hippie van to actually have that then come across as, a death van is everything against Volkswagen vans. But basically that's what he had, a Volkswagen camper. And then he outfitted it with that minimal equipment. It had sort of a stretcher in the back. And when we were at the Zach Bagans Museum, they'd set it up so it was like the original setup. So they had the stretcher, the chemicals and IV and everything in there. And then essentially... there was like an IV stand and a Mercitron device. So the van became sort of this symbol, and it's great because in a way, Kevorkian didn't really have access to, medical facilities that permitted assisted suicide procedures, hence the laws. And then hospitals and clinics didn't want anything to do with him either. So conducting those sort of procedures in the homes also raised complications, and that's why the van was so popular. It was practical, it was mobile, he had a controlled environment. Essentially, it worked quite well. The first documented death was actually June 1990. That's when I was born. Sorry, just side note there. And it had a 54-year-old woman there who had early onset Alzheimer's. And she actually contacted Kevorkian, wanting assistance as her cognitive processes were declining. So that was carried out in a public park in Michigan. Inside the van. And she activated that device herself. That then obviously created quite a lot of national attention, both support and then strong criticism. A lot of people question the ethics of performing such a procedure, outside of medical environment, and other people obviously viewed it as a compassionate thing for people who are wanting to die. And then over the next, several years, Kevorkian, he's said to have claimed to assist about over 100 people, not all through the van. Some were done through rented spaces, private homes, but the van was kind of it. It was that central symbol to be associated with his work, essentially. So once that sort of came through, obviously, with the uproar, Michigan authorities wanted to prosecute Kevorkian, but because it was, technically assisted suicide was not illegal at the time, charges were sort of dismissed. Then they obviously tried to put in place, laws that to prohibit assisted suicide from that. But Kevorkian didn't give up. You have to sort of give him a bit of credit. He was quite passionate about his craft and his beliefs, and that's from where he kind of continued on, regardless of the critics, arguing that his actions were, according to patient rights and medical ethics as he understood them. So there was a lot of media coverage around that. There was a lot of ethical debates. There was a lot of medical opposition, especially professional organizations. And luckily for Kevorkian at that stage back in the 1980s, he did actually end up avoiding any major convictions in relation to his actions. That actually changed in 1998 when Kevorkian personally administered a lethal injection to a patient rather than via the patient trigger process. And it was at that stage he actually recorded the act on video and then provided the footage to 60 Minutes to highlight his argument that terminally ill individuals deserved the right to the process. So once he actually did that himself, then it became obviously a completely different ballpark. So he was then charged with second-degree murder. He was convicted in 1999 and received a sentence of 10 to 26 years. Only ended up managing to serve 8. But I guess now we get to talk about a little bit like the aftermath of that and the legacy of that, because Kevorkian was released from prison back in 2007. After the 8 years, but he wasn't obviously allowed to then be involved with anything to do with assisted suicide, and he ended up spending his final years just lecturing and writing, continuing to advocate for what he called the right to die. He ended up dying in 2011 of natural causes. So, and then the van, as this big symbol of people having the right to die, essentially became like an artifact, and now is located at the Zach Baggins Museum. But it does obviously continue to evoke questions about, personal autonomy, legal boundaries, all of those sort of things, responsibilities of medical professionals as well. And obviously, even though it was, well, I guess now a bit ahead of its time, Kevorkian's actions contributed to, nationwide or global discussions in regards to, assisted suicide and euthanasia. So now there's been such a push, there are quite a few countries around the world that do permit those things now. So even though it kind of remains to be one of those controversial things, I mean, I guess I personally believe he was just a bit ahead of his time. I don't know about you, Paul, but I guess I do believe in the right to die in those sort of circumstances.
Yeah, it's a very contentious kind of a subject there, Tara.
Just a touch.
A little bit deep, as usual.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I obviously it comes down to opinion. There are a lot of things I think back then where you kind of think. I think the big thing for me was, well, how did obviously these people contacted Kevorkian and wanted to die. Well, I mean, what kind of checks and balances were there in regards to that?
True.
It's not like you get a certificate from the hospital to say you're terminally ill. Who back then it was sort of like, well, you just literally decided whether or not you wanted to die. And you could have said anything to Kevorkian, whether it was Alzheimer's or, any other disease or cancer and people wanting to die. So it kind of, to me, that space was just sort of wide open for interpretation. And even though I did try to do a little bit of research on it, I couldn't really specifically find anything, maybe because it was in the 1980s, I don't know. But yeah, that for me kind of leaves a little bit open. And even now, obviously, with things like assisted suicide, there is a big discussion around that about who determines, what terminally is, who determines, and for people who aren't necessarily terminally ill but dealing with other things, they're even talking now about, like clinical depression and people who haven't been able to get out of that for, decades, wanting to end their lives and those sort of things. And where do we sort of draw that line, or where do we decide? But I guess that's why Kevorkian believed in those things. People have a right to die if they want to die. I guess I'm of the opinion, as long as you're not taking anyone out with you. Yeah. Paul, where do you land on that? I'm a little bit curious.
Interesting question. Look, I guess it kind of comes down to, being from a Catholic country and all the religious aspects that you have back home, would be viewed upon as something that's quite evil. Obviously, it'd be suicide. So suicide is a sin.
Yeah.
So from a religious point of view, if you're Catholic, obviously, then it'd be something that isn't open for you if that's a decision that you want to make. Look, when it comes down to it at the end of the day, I think that people should have their own choice because it's their own life. And obviously, if somebody is going to decide on euthanasia, it would be taken very seriously. And there'd have to be a lot of checks and balances done to make sure that you qualify for that criteria. So I can imagine that nowadays, if you go to one of these countries that has assisted suicide, then there would be quite a rigorous process to see if you fit that criteria. Do I think that people should have the right to die? Yeah, I do believe that it should be an option, at least. And that's, essentially at the end of the day, if you go through that rigorous process, obviously doctors and psychologists, psychiatrists, and whomever else is involved in making that decision with you, then, you know, if they are all in agreement that you're making the right decision, then obviously it should be your decision at the end of the day. It is your life. It's very contentious.
Have you seen the movie Me Before You?
Not offhand.
It is a little bit of a chick flick romance movie, so I wouldn't surprise
So
me
no.
if you hadn't. I don't know. You could have watched it at a sleepover for all I know, Paul.
And no would be the answer to that again. Anyway.
Okay, so basically it is this movie in which there is a young guy. I would say he's in his like mid to late 20s, and he becomes a quadriplegic. And he is was very active in his life. Was very fit, did a lot of activities, traveled, and then obviously had this accident and became a quadriplegic. And he, over like a certain amount of years, ended up, choosing to end his life because to him his quality of life was just not there. And even though, and you do have the whole storyline there with the girl comes in and she tries to, make his life better, etc. And even that doesn't work. But he still chose, I think it was Switzerland or something that he chose to go to and with the whole process. And I think that was the first movie I've ever watched where it actually had it sort of depicted, someone choosing that. And even though that's not necessarily a terminally ill diagnosis per se, obviously his quality of life was just, to him, it was gone. He didn't see his life worth living anymore. So, I mean, look, after watching that film, I guess I became more of an advocate for it. But I've always been one of those people that's very, you have a right, to, your body, your choice sort of thing. And I guess there'd be other topics in relation to that I would probably support. That is definitely for like another time. But, it's still, to me, like I was just laying in bed last night, like thinking about this van driving around and, Kevorkian and how he went about things. And it does kind of make me wonder, like the amount of people that maybe went through that process that didn't get an opportunity to do things like properly, go through, medical processes or properly speak with a psychologist or psychiatrist in relation to their, diagnosis or their quality of life. And even now, I would think like maybe not so much in Australia because we're quite lucky, I guess, with our amount of healthcare, but it does make me wonder, in America, like people being able to make that decision when a lot of them don't even have access to basic healthcare. How do you then determine, or how do you then, you wouldn't even be able to go through that. You probably wouldn't be able to afford to go through that. But yeah, it does kind of make me wonder if that's also a reason why sometimes people just end up giving up because they don't have another option.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree that in some circumstances that certainly that may be a viable option, and if you go through the proper processes and you're suitable for that option, then by all means you should have the choice. I think that most people in that situation, they are, I guess, diagnosed with a terminal illness or a quality of life as such that they're no longer happy and they're miserable, and it's an easier option per se. Then I'd probably agree that it's an option that could be utilized for sure.
And I do want to refer back again to my awesome plug of the Zach Baggins Museum, because it is, I wouldn't say that it was like a heavy feeling walking in that room where that van was, but just the knowledge of, or just understanding that there was, over 100 people that died in that van. And, I couldn't really find too much information about what they do with the bodies afterwards either. It was kind of just like, just fly the stretcher
Only
out and drop them off.
would try and think about something like that. Most people would be like, oh my God, this is a dead van. People died here. Wow, how horrific. But only you would think about, I wonder what they did with the bodies. Did they cremate them? Did they throw them into a hole in the ground? Did they throw them into the river? No.
Look, these are important things to think about, I think. It's not just me. I think there are definitely people out there who have weird curiosities. Isn't that why we have this podcast? It's not just about me being weird.
No comment.
Hey, you're still friends with me and I'm still weird, so
Allegedly.
I'm not boring. I just definitely invoke those questions in front of people and then I get those looks like.
So when you did see the van, did you get any weird vibes from it? Creepy hair standing on the back of the neck, anything like that?
Not really, but I think at that time I had heard about Kevorkian. So, obviously because it was around the time where I was born, but like I wasn't overly familiar with his story. So even though they kind of give you a bit of a small summary while you're there in the museum, not to the extent where, me doing a little bit of a deep dive and reading up on him. So at that point, like I think a little bit was lost on me. I didn't really understand
that makes sense.
the magnitude of what was kind of in front of me. I'm just looking at it like, oh, there's a stretcher in the back and there's these canisters and IVs and shit. But yeah, I think it was a little bit lost on me. But now I think, when I sit back and understand or just even I guess when people talk about Kevorkian, and even when I've talked about Kevorkian, I try to be kind of more factual. I don't try to be too emotive about it. But, I guess he was so strong in his convictions and he didn't actually let anyone persuade him in his beliefs. I do give him credit for that in the sense that he really believed that people had, a right to choose how they could die or if they needed to die. And the symbol of that van at that point didn't hit me as much as it does now.
Okay, that's most interesting. I get that perspective. That makes a whole lot of sense. So, once again, Tara brings my whole level of happiness down several notches.
Yeah, I forgot you were just so happy.
I was so happy before I
yeah.
started this podcast, and now I'm just like, oh.
Everyone could tell you were just bursting with joy.
Absolutely,
And then I was like, here's some history that's depressing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, look, once again, interesting.
Yeah.
Contentious.
I like to bring up these topics. I mean, if anyone is familiar with my dad and I have a very healthy debate relationship. And it does sometimes come around your morals, but it's also about a little bit to do with religion. And I was technically brought up Christian, but, as an adult, my views have changed significantly around autonomy in particular. I'm very big on not letting books or, certain ideas or even history, dictate how we have to be going forward. So to me, I guess I do view Kevorkian as more of a revolutionary, a compassionate person.
Wow. Well, there you've heard it here.
Feel free to argue with me in the comments. I probably won't reply, but feel free to have your view in the comments.
Do we even get any comments?
Probably not.
I have never looked. Sorry.
Most of it's like, what's this?
I don't do any of that social media thing, so my apologies. I just like to have a podcast and talk about these weird and wonderful things.
Well, maybe when they bring in the social media ban for under 16s, we should do like a social media ban for old people who don't know how to use it, Paul. And then you'd be sweet.
True. Yes, I agree. Maybe you should do social media bans for weird people too, Tara. Then we're both in trouble, hey?
We're all screwed, okay?
We're all in trouble.
We're all a little weird, okay? We're all a little weird.
The end is coming. Oh my God, no social media. Oh. What will happen then? We'll probably be happier and healthier, hey?
Well, considering the news this week with Netflix buying Warner Brothers.
Yes.
I will be I will just be entertained with my streaming services. Thank you.
So that'll be interesting because I have Netflix and HBO. So what happens then? Does HBO disappear or does
I hope
Netflix
so.
then?
Because I'm sick of paying for like 3 services. So, like let's merge it all together, and then I just have to pay one fee.
Well, as long as Harry Potter is merged over to Netflix, then Harry Potter and Game of Thrones is
Yes.
merged over to Netflix, then my HBO subscription will disappear.
Yeah.
Well, anybody watching from Netflix probably don't listen to me. Nobody else does.
But just to give you guys a bit of a heads up, because we have had a little bit of a break while we've been doing some sort of, I guess you could call it content investigation in the background.
Oh, yes, that's right. We have.
Yes. So we've been attending a few different things, or one thing in particular. We've got another thing coming up this week. So we will be having some more interesting, fresh experiences to share with you hopefully soon. Obviously being aware it is Christmas coming up. So we'll do our best to get things out, but at the same time,
Yeah,
we're
for
adults.
sure. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
We'll get around to it. It was actually really good participating in something that I had an interest in, but haven't attended something like a workshop before for the paranormal. So I found it really enjoyable and learned some very interesting things that I certainly will look at in the future and see how they work for me. Probably not very well. Why are you laughing?
You know why I'm laughing.
I have no idea.
For another time when we get to talk about that lovely class.
Oh, yeah. And the food was awesome. So we'll have to absolutely give a shout out for that place as well.
What was it called, Paul?
I can't remember.
Fourth Child.
Right. And that was in Ipswich. Right. The food there is absolutely amazing. Also, just want to let you know, we're not getting paid for this. They have no idea we're plugging it. But I think sometimes when you go to a restaurant, you have a good experience. The food is really good. The quantity of the food is really good. And the prices are really good as well. Then these places deserve a shout out. And I certainly shout out the Fourth Child in Ipswich. I think the food there, the menu is really, really good. The atmosphere great. The premises, fantastic. I can't say enough about it. I had a really good time. But don't take it from me. Go there yourself if you get an opportunity and see how you go. And then you can just blast me in the comments then after that. So see what happens.
You mean blast me?
Well, here I am plugging it. You only just mentioned the name. I'm doing all the plugging.
No.
Anyway, we've probably come to the end of our podcast today. I want to say thanks to Tara for that really interesting topic. I found it really interesting. It's, as I said, quite contentious. It's very argumentative. And obviously there's people that are on one side and people on the other side. And look, that's fine. We're human beings. We agree on certain principles and we disagree on certain principles. And as long as we keep it, respectful and appreciate that people have opinions, then that's really good. Other than that, that comes to the end of our podcast today. Tara?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But like and subscribe. I have to say that now at the end of all of our podcasts is to remind you all that we like it when you follow us. Please. Thank you.